Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dreamcast. I was having some technical difficulties the last episode, and the video didn't go through for whatever reason. So I'm now recording on my phone on the mobile app, and I'm hoping that it works well because redoing 20-minute videos is the most fun thing to do. But anyway, I hope everyone is doing well. Our last conversation had to do with the art of conversation. I shared a lot of tidbits and things that I had researched that really help us to have a more meaningful and more connecting conversation, mostly through verbal, because again, that is what conversation is defined as, a verbal conversation, face to face, phone, whatever, FaceTime. And then some touching on text conversations as well. So today we're just going to talk about some basic positive conversation methods. One thing that is very important when having a conversation is to ask open-ended questions. Everyone likes to talk about themselves. People light up when they talk about themselves. I see this every time I work at the hospital. I'll ask patients just something simple. So where are you from? So what brought you here? Not here to the hospital, but like here to where I live. I'll ask them questions about the movie they're watching, different things like that. But you can instantly see them like light up when they are asked about themselves. So yeah, people love to talk about themselves. So asking people questions about themselves is going to stimulate a good, or at least the beginning of a good conversation. And what is an open-ended question? An open-ended question is a question that does not provide a simple yes or no answer. Like a closed-ended question. A closed-ended question would be, are you happy? Now, someone could elaborate and say, no, I'm not, and this is why. But they could just say no, and that could be the end. So asking something that's open-ended is more so like, what is your idea of a perfect date? What was it about New York that made you go twice? Something like that. It could be anything, but those kinds of questions provoke more than just a yes or no. You can't just say yes or no to those questions. And so when we ask those, again, it provides us an opportunity to delve more into the person, and hopefully, they'll reciprocate and do it back, and then you have a really good back and flow conversation. So some questions you could ask that are open-ended, what did you feel about blah, blah, blah? How do you feel about blah, blah, blah? What was it like when blah, blah, blah? I like to say blah, blah, blah a lot, but the rest of it you can provide, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. And these questions provoke answers that are more filled with thought and emotion, feeling. Again, not just yes, no. Did you have a good sleep? Yes. How did you sleep? I slept really well. I didn't wake up during the night. I feel like I slept deeply. You get the gist. And then following up with those responses with more open-ended questions that elaborate on what they told you. So say you asked them, what was it about New York City that made you go twice, go two times, as I said before. I really loved how there was so much to do. I really didn't have to plan anything. I could just walk outside and I could easily find tons of different activities. I didn't have to drive. I could use public transportation, blah, blah, blah. And then the follow up. So it seems that you really enjoyed the ability to not have to really think about what you were doing. That's also affirming and acknowledging what they said. That's another part that we're gonna get into. But then you can ask them something like, how did you feel about being on public transportation as opposed to driving everywhere? Now you've followed up with to the first question and their answer, and now another question. And the conversation can then flow really, really smoothly. And not only that, but interestingly, it keeps the conversation lively and engaging. Now, when someone is responding to our open-ended questions, we want to actively listen. We're all guilty of thinking of something else while someone is speaking. Everyone. It's hard in a way not to, because you're already processing what they're saying and formulating a response. But when we actively listen, we can really show that we were paying attention to what they were saying, excuse me, and that what they were saying was important to us. Instead of just like waiting for your turn to speak and then talk about your own self, it's important that we give them some validation, some acknowledgement, as now we're leading into another part of conversation, affirming what someone has said. So let's go back into the what do you like about what about New York made you want to visit twice? They said that they really liked using the public transportation, that they didn't have to think of things to do, that there was always tons of activities. So you can affirm that. Oh yeah, that makes sense. It sounds really cool that you didn't really have to make an itinerary. You kind of had it just wherever you ended up was something, you might be able to do and involve yourself in. So you've showed that you were listening because you affirmed what they said, and you validated and gave some acknowledgement to what they said. You didn't just say, when they said, what they liked about visiting New York, you didn't just say, oh yeah, so my next trip is going to be to Thailand and blah, 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 blah. Because then you've kind of taken away from their experience and now you're leading into yours. Now, it would be okay, though, to be like, yeah, I really liked visiting New York, or I would like to visit too because of the things you mentioned. I'm thinking about going to Thailand for blah, blah, blah. Now you see it's okay because you've talked about what they said and then you talked about what you said. So you've affirmed them, you've validated, you've given acknowledgement. And that really shows listening. It shows care. It shows that we're interested, that we're curious about them. And again, hopefully they will reciprocate and the conversation will flow really interestingly and engagingly, and there will be a connection happening. Now, if we don't get what the other person's saying, say we don't understand it, it's okay to ask for clarification. And clarification can look like a question. So what I'm hearing is that you really liked going to New York because of blah, blah, blah. Or can you elaborate on what you meant when you said you liked that you didn't have to plan activities? So it shows that you were listening because you're repeating back what they said. And it also shows that you want to know more or want to understand them because you're asking for clarification. You didn't just say, I don't know what you mean, and just move on. It was important to you to find the answer to that question. And again, that shows care, it shows interest, and it shows that we want to build a connection, that we want to have, that we're an active participant in that conversation. You can also what is the word? I can't think of it, but you can also repeat back what they said. I think it's called parroting. Repeat back what they said. So you could say, so what I'm hearing is that you like going to New York for the abundance of activities. And then they can say, yes, that's what I mean. And then you're like, okay, I get that. Now you see, you didn't have to get into a full discussion about it, but just repeating them and asking, is this what you mean when you said blah, blah, blah? They give you the answer. That helps show, again, the same things: interest, care, the want to have a meaningful conversation. And if you don't agree with what someone is telling you, that's okay, because you don't have to agree with, obviously, everything that someone tells you. And I think it's actually really interesting when you don't agree, because it really makes for an interesting conversation. Because if you're both agreeing, I mean, that's cool too. Oh yeah, I agree with that. I like that too. But when you don't, it's like a moment. Like, I've never seen it that way. So, like, can you explain that to me more? And then you can learn a whole other perspective from that person. And, you don't have to say it in a way that's mean, like, or not mean, but just not as nice. I don't agree. That can come off kind of dismissive and a little rude. But we can say something like, that's interesting. I never really looked at it like that. Can you tell me more about blah, blah, blah? Or, I'm not aware of that. What made you come to that conclusion? Those kinds of way of phrasing it really still keeps the conversation on a positive level, and it still shows engagement and not dismissive of what their opinion is. We want to be genuine in our responses. This shows the other person that we care about them and what they're talking about. And we don't want to just focus on ourselves. Like I said before, hopefully there will be reciprocation, and they'll ask us some open-ended questions to show that they're interested too. But we don't want to just jump into our own experiences when someone shares theirs with us, because this will definitely come off as uncaring. It can come off as being uninterested in what they were sharing, and they may be less likely to want to share with us in the future, or in that conversation. They might start getting quiet, because it's like, what is the point of me even saying it if you're just only wanting to talk about yourself? So the goal is really to connect deeper and more fully, not leave the conversation feeling like it was just like a waste of your time. There was no building. We want to leave a conversation with an uplifted feeling. And again, this topic is more so or for verbal conversations. But not leaving texting out, a lot of this same information can be applied to text conversations. If someone shares something with us on text, we can just as easily acknowledge them with either an emoji at the beginning, at the the very least, excuse me, and then text them the same thing we would say, excuse me, the same thing we would say verbally, like, I see that you said blah blah blah. What I'm reading is this. What did you mean when you said this? I think that's really cool how you enjoyed that. And then this is what I found interesting. So you can still do the same thing on text, even though texting is a lot quicker and it's not really meant for long, drawn out, back and forth conversations. People do end up using it like that. So when we do, it's important to still abide by some of the same basis for in being engaging and connecting with the person, because there's a lot you can convey in a text with your words. And so we can still show our active participation and care for the person we're having a conversation with by asking them open-ended questions, following up with them, affirming their responses, and then sharing ours. And this, again, will show that we are engaged, that we're participating, that we're there to learn more about them and share us as well. And actually, in text, acknowledgement and validation are probably even more important because we don't have the same things that we have in a face-to-face or verbal conversation, like on the phone. Like if you were telling me something on the phone, I could give you some verbal affirmations. Yeah, right. Yeah. Those kind of things. On a text, people, sorry, there was something, I'm trying to see if there was an animal by my window. On a text, you're not going to be, oh, it's a guy spraying the grass. Okay, so on a text, it's you're not going to have those, right, the nods to give us that affirmation. So even more so, do we have to really respond when we get the chance to with a, I see what you're saying, it makes sense that blah blah blah, clarifying questions if we need to. So what I'm reading is that this, and then sharing ourselves. But we can do a lot of the similar things on text. Again, with the open-ended questions and giving people affirmations and not just leaving them on read, which is rude. So we need to really be intentional with our responses to text and verbal and face-to-face conversations. Again, by asking open-ended questions, acknowledging, asking follow-up questions, just being curious. When we are curious and interested in someone, it will come across that way because we'll want to know about them. So the only way to do that is to ask things. Anyone who knows me knows I love to ask questions, and it can sometimes be a lot, and sometimes, people have said it feels interrogating. I'm really not trying to interrogate. I ask to learn. And if I'm asking questions, it means I'm interested. If I'm not, I'm probably not. But that doesn't mean I won't give someone the respect of their time and energy that's being shared with me. I just might not be as engaging. But we want to give people the respect and care that they deserve when they're sharing with us, just as we would want if we were sharing with them. And it's really a beautiful thing, a conversation, when it's like an inherent a rhythm in a really good, meaningful conversation, a beautiful back and forth. And that's why it's an art. And that's why it's important to cultivate it, because it is dying in a way. It's a dying art. It's like you're hardly seeing in-person shopping anymore. Everything is online. But we are social creatures, and being able to converse in a way that provides both parties, or however many parties in the conversation, with a sense of meaning and connection is important. And so how we do it can really make or break that. And so I hope that these tips and this information shared will help us all to be more mindful of when we're conversing with someone, or to add these things to our artistic tool belt, so to speak, and that we can all create more connection and meaning in the conversations that we have. I hope everyone has a wonderful, positive, energy-filled day, and thank you for listening to Dreamcast.